Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition, and we turn now to poem 494, Going to Him, Happy Letter. Now, this is a significant poem because we have two versions of this poem that you will find in the Johnson edition. The pronouns are changed, and a few other subtle differences that we won't get into. Is opposed to going to him, happy letter, it's going to her, happy letter. This is, I think, significant because version 1, published in 1891, was actually titled The Letter. And this one, with some slight variations, is the same poem first sent to Sam Boyles and found among his papers after his death, and then the other to Sue, her pal, and of course the wife of her brother Austin. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments where we talked about both Sam Boyles, the editor of the Springfield Republican, as well as Sue. And as well, I'm hopeful that you've read through the previous 493 poems. We just finished with 493, The World Stands Solemner. If you have, then the play of language that we will discover in this poem, I think quite remarkable, but we will have seen some of this play before. Some have called this even an apostrophe, a letter as a person, if you will, a happy person, a happy letter, who in fact she will speak to the letter because the letter is going on to someone she cares about, Sam and Sue. Emily will point out in this that she loves writing, but she doesn't consider herself a very good writer, which is of course going to be a bit ironic. Emily was a great writer of letters, and in many ways taking almost the voice of a child, very childlike at times. The excitement of this poem will be to speak to the letter that is going to speak to Sam, but don't give up too much. Or, of course, if we were following the second version, speak to Sue. We'll just play the game with Sam, and you guys can kind of think through how this poem is read differently by Sue than maybe by Sam. Going to him, happy letter. Tell him the page I didn't write. Tell him I only said the syntax and left the verb and the pronoun out. Tell him just how the fingers hurried, then how they waited slow, and then you wished you had eyes in your pages so you could see what moved them so. Tell him it wasn't a practiced writer, you guessed, from the way the sentence toiled. You could hear the bodice tug behind you as if it held but the might of a child. You almost pitied it. It worked so. Tell him, no, you may quibble there, for it would split his heart to know it. And then you and I were silenter. Tell him, night finished before we finished, and the old clock kept kneeing day, and you got sleepy and begged to be ended. What could it hinder so to say? Tell him just how she sealed you, cautious, but if he asks where you are hid until tomorrow, happy letter, gesture coquette and shake your head. Notice the 5 exclamation points of this poem. Notice the 8 repetitions of tell him. This is a brilliant little exercise by a gifted letter writer and poet to speak directly to the letter as if the letter had a persona of its own. Again, this kind of apostrophe concept. And hoping that Sam, the recipient of this letter, that he kept this poem in his own letters, will be able to gain some sense of the childlike quality of, can we just call it pure joy of this poem. Notice the breathlessness. Going to him, happy letter. Tell him, like children will do. Tell him the page I didn't write. Now, it's a fascinating line. There's a lot of things she says I'm going to say. There's things I am not going to say. It is a poem like this that made us call our series Chats with Emily, because this is a primary model of the way in which Emily's stuff can be so personal. And yet at the same time, notice we'll end with there's things you're not going to get to know the secretive nature of Emily. Tell him I only said the syntax and left the verb and the pronoun out. It's brilliant. It's as if she knows that in her own writing there's things she does, there's things she doesn't do. There's games she plays, there's games she won't play. Again, all the dashes help us here. Tell him just how the fingers hurried. Again, the excitement of writing. Then how they waited. Dash, slow, dash, slow. Again, it's brilliant. And her use of the word waited is, I mean, Emily does this all the time. She kind of blows us away with the verbs that she will choose. Then how you wished you had eyes in your pages so you could see what moved them so. In other words, she says, I wish this letter could translate more than just the syntax, more than just the words. I wish this letter could say what really is standing behind it. But of course, notice she's not talking to Sam Boyles, the recipient of this poem in the letter. She's talking to the letter to say, I wish you could tell him this information. And then we're back to another tell him. Tell him it wasn't a practiced writer. That's funny. The great scholar Priest has pointed out this is one of the least true statements that Emily ever wrote about herself. It wasn't a practiced writer. Notice P and W both capitalized. You guessed from the way the sentence toiled, from waited to toiled. Those of us who struggle with writing know these ideas about waiting and toiling. It's like you're trying to say the right thing and it never seems to happen. You could hear the bodice tug. You'll remember bodice from 208, and we're going to get at the end of the poem to the suggestion that maybe after she finished this poem and she folded it up in a letter, that she put it in some kind of hidden place close to her heart, close to her breast, close to her skin, right? It's very almost sexual. That you hear the bodice tug behind you as if it held but the might of a child. And I think this is the point here. Emily playing those games of being childlike but not always expressing childlike ideas or sentiments. You almost pitied it. Takes us back to poem 492, doesn't it? Pity the pard, right? You almost pitied it. It worked so. The language, the ink itself or the pencil itself on the pen. Tell him, dash, no, dash, you may quibble there. In other words, there's things I don't want you. Because for it would split his heart to know it. In other words, don't release too many secrets to him because it might upset him, and I don't want to upset him. And then you and I were silenter. The letter and her were silenter. Tell him, night finished. This is, of course, part of our longing to know Emily's rhythms, her writer rhythms, right? She wrote in early morning, sometimes late into the night. Tell him, night finished before we finished. In other words, there was way more to say. And the old clock, notice old and clock both capitalized, kept kneeing day. It's brilliant with an exclamation point, day. And you got sleepy and begged to be ended. Begged, taking us back to poem 373, you'll remember. And begged to be ended. What could it hinder so to say? All these sibilants, these S sounds. In other words, there's way more I could have written, and you, the letter, know that, but it was getting dark and it was late at night, so I had to shut it down. Tell him just how she sealed you. Notice it's not I. She sealed you. Cautious, exclamation point again, right? Cautious. But if he asks where you are hid until tomorrow, the letter, happy letter, back to the opening line, gesture coquette and shake your head. In other words, there's things about where this letter went that you can't know. The secretive side, again, of Emily, the playful side of Emily. I think at 2a, the point here is that there are things that even letters cannot express. We've used that term before, translinguistic, beyond. Love is, of course, of this nature. At 2b, Wisher has called this poem uncommon or complicated metrical effects, and I think he's dead on right about this. To read this poem, you guys read it on your own out loud and just get a sense of how to read it. It's almost breathless at times. The tell him of 8 times and all, of course, all the exclamation points. At 3a, many scholars have pointed out that Emily might be somehow channeling the great Renaissance poem of Waller's Go Lovely Rose. We won't exegete that one here now, but go ahead and look it up and you can see some similarities of talking to the rose, to speak, of course, to the lover. Finally, at 3b, 2 questions to own a poem like this. What is your favorite letter that you ever wrote? If you guys still write letters or texts. And what is the favorite letter that you ever received? And maybe Emily's This Is My Letter to the World you'll enjoy even better now. Thank you.